We are back. Episode 3. We made it to episode 3 of the Superintendents or podcast. And as usual, first off, did you guys have a good Thanksgiving?
We did.
It was great.
That's awesome. It was. It's a great holiday.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we'll start with the basics. Usually the format we've been trying to follow is we'll start with you telling us what's coming up.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about what we think are the biggest issues. I think it's going to be similar to the past 2 weeks, pouches and contracts. And then we'll talk about things coming up. So if I said that wrong, what I meant at the beginning, talk about things that you want to highlight that's happened since the last episode.
Sure. Yeah.
So what do you want to highlight? What's happened?
Oh, there's just a lot of irons in the fire. So fall extracurricular activities and athletics have concluded, and we're transitioning to winter sports, which is always a milestone in the calendar. And there's always there's always some postseason play. Our athletic programs have been so wildly successful.
They really have.
It's just and so they just get better and better every year. And so, and this year we had kind of a wild card in the mix. We have our volleyball program that is not, it's a relatively new program, but the coach is amazing. And so Kara knows the coach pretty well.
Kayla Weiland. She's a third grade teacher at Woodville School.
And so she's in, I want to say year 4, Kara?
I think so. As coach,
As a coach,
I believe.
yeah. But she played volleyball and I think basketball in college, and is just so connected to the kids, and they have completely bought in to just the philosophy of teaming, supporting one another, just being part of it. And they've just worked so hard. But this year they made it to the Final Four for the state tournament, which was just, I think, far exceeded, I think, even the coach's expectations from just listening to her. Yeah.
And it's been amazing. They've done a great job, and as many people know, I'm very involved with the Boys and Girls Clubs, and one of our alumni is the assistant athletic director, Danny Lum.
Yeah.
It's a Boys and Girls Club kid. His first job was at the Boys and Girls Club. He was a Youth of the Year, so proud to see him doing well. And everything he knows about athletics, he learned from me. It's, just, if he ever listens to this, he will surely agree that,
That's good. That's good. We'll have to check in with him.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it was really nice. The other night at school committee, we were able to have some of the extracurricular students participating in extracurriculars and coaches. We had the dance team. They had a really successful season. We also had Tom Bankert and representatives from the marching band. I know girls cross country. The cross country teams are always consistently great. Girls cross country had a great season, and boys soccer as well. We couldn't get everybody to the table, but I think more to come. That's just a small sample, but really great season overall.
Yeah, so we're likely going to split the meeting. So in our last school committee meeting, we had whoever could come and attend and just talk about their experience. And we had representation from the groups that Kara just spoke about. But this coming meeting, this Tuesday night on the 12th, we'll have representation there from soccer and from athletics to talk a little bit more about the success that was had this past fall.
No, and if you want to talk quickly, or is it boring now to talk about how successful the marching band is? Like, it's just been so many years. You're just like, you know what?
It's interesting. Every year, our music programs are nominated from a community perspective, right? We get a letter every year that says that, your program is being recognized as an outstanding community for music and for the contributions that music has made to the community and to the students. And it's just such a great award. It doesn't get old. It really doesn't. And I can share this. So it's interesting. So Tom Bankert had made up magnets with the W and it said marching band on it. And so I went out to my car and one was stuck on the back of my car, right? And on the weekend, I was in Watertown and there was a relative of someone from the Wakefield marching band, and they asked me if they could have the magnet right off of my car. And so it doesn't get old. It's great to, and really what's great is to watch the connections that the kids have. And the kids work tirelessly the entire fall, and they perform and they perform and they perform and they perform. And now we have 8th graders performing with our high schoolers, right? And so the connections, again, the connections that the kids have, those are the things that kids will remember forever.
No, it's so true, and it's always been such an amazing program, and it's so funny. I talk to people, and especially as people are moving into Wakefield, right?
Yeah.
And they say, "Is Wakefield, is it like a hockey town or a football town or whatnot?" And I'm like, believe it or not, if you were to look at the history, because even when I was in high school, which it's now a lot longer ago, I'd say it wasn't that long ago, but no, it was. But marching band, consistently successful, consistently huge, and just one of the most exceptional programs. So I always tell people, believe it or not, I'm like, it's a music town. It's a band town.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, and listen, a lot of people go to the football games, but there are a lot of people who go to the football games for the marching band.
Yeah.
And I think that's a credit to the school and the music culture that they've done, and a credit to Tom, obviously. And then he was following in the footsteps of Kim. And
we would be remiss if we didn't mention Kim Smith in this conversation, And Kim hired me. True, full disclosure, I was her assistant superintendent. This is my 9th year here, and as Kim handed the music program off to Tom Bankert and the superintendency, I was fortunate enough to be selected to be the superintendent. And you're right, it is. I meet people all the time. I'm in the ranks as superintendents. I met a fellow superintendent who I came in as a new superintendent with, who shared with me, "Oh yeah, I was in the Wakefield marching band." So it comes from everywhere. I had a former teacher that I worked with who said, "Oh, I just want to let you know, my husband is from Wakefield. He was in the marching band." And and they repeat all of the rules of marching band. If you're not 15 minutes early before the hour, then you're late, right? Like these little
That's
details
true.
that everyone has taken on, just in regard to just a work ethic. But it's pretty special, and what's great to see as well is that our athletics is breaking into that space as well, and one of the things that we've talked about is there's a different feel at the high school now. When you walk around the halls, when you see students interacting with one another, and you see how kids support one another. It just really feels great. It just really feels wonderful. We just had our 8th graders up to do a tour of the building, and we had high schoolers touring the 8th graders. And they're not the high schoolers are not scripted. They're allowed to take questions and give share their perspectives, and just listening, just watching them pass in the hall and just listening to them talk about, like, "Oh, this is where our athletics go, and athletics is an amazing experience. You'll love that if you play a sport. This is where our band happens." They just every hallway they'd mention some little wrinkle that something special was happening. Yeah.
No, that is wonderful. All right, so do you guys want to transition to some of the more fun topics?
Sure.
All right. This is not in order of importance, just in the order that I'm remembering, but let's start with. So the first episode we ever did, we talked about cell phone pouches.
Yep.
You guys said you were going to get some feedback from the community and then implement it. I guess, have there been any changes since that first meeting? What are they, and how's it going overall?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I think you probably have, you've talked to more parents directly. I think it has started. There was communication around that from the Galvin administration. So I think things are going well. I think there's always going to be, little things that are a topic of interest. The kids have their own opinions, I think.
Always. Speaking of that volleyball team, I remember during the logo or whatever debate, I think it was the volleyball team that put the duct tape over the logo, and I was like, well, this is going to make things interesting.
Yeah, so which is good. We want to hear from them. But I think at the end of the day, and I think Doug talked about this earlier today when we were referencing about our message to the community, it's just about a little bit of a reset around expectations, which I think everyone at Galvin can agree was needed. I think the teachers, the administration, just the idea that, even though there had been language in our handbook, it just wasn't feeling like it had enough weight behind it, that we needed to do an overall reset to just make the expectations clear that it's cell phones, AirPods, we just can't have them out in class. They're too much of a distraction. And I think these pouches, while they're not perfect, they help to just kind of streamline the expectations across the building.
And even I think you had mentioned it was even more critical during that out of class time, like when you're in the hallways, the lunches.
The unstructured times.
The unstructured times is
are
the word
tough.
you used.
They're tough.
And to a certain extent, it's an effort to curb bullying, which seems to have skyrocketed. I think, and if you said this or if somebody else said this, my apologies, but I think somebody had mentioned to me that the spikes in cyberbullying were happening during those unstructured times.
That's correct.
And
That's correct.
and yeah, and if you saw the numbers, and it's not just Wakefield, but if you see the numbers in Wakefield, Stoneham, Melrose, Reading, all the neighboring towns, the increase in bullying, especially through cyberbullying, is incredible. I mean, it's not in a good way, not incredible in a good way, incredible in a oh my God, what's going on way.
Yeah, and so the United States Surgeon General has put out a notice speaking about the dangers of social media use for children at the middle school level. And so a lot of research is happening, and I think the Mass Department of Education of Elementary and Secondary Ed here in our state has kind of picked up on that, and they've provided grants for districts to apply for to create programming, and that's what has gotten us to where we are with our Yonder Pouch program, is that the goal is to just try to create some secure way to keep devices in a safe space while kids can just focus on teaching and learning. And that's really hard. When kids have devices out, when kids feel that pull, it's like a gravitational force. It's like a pull to keep track of what's happening socially, who's doing what, who's saying what. And kids aren't different than adults. So when you walk around, or if you go to Linfield Marketplace, and you'll see people with their eyes on screens, and so that's been difficult in schools. It's been difficult in regard to the social impact. It's been difficult in regard to the bullying impact. It's been very difficult for teachers in regard to teaching and learning as well, right? Because there's fallout from all of those things. But this is just one opportunity. So we have a grant. It's a 1-year grant. It's not in perpetuity. It's just an opportunity for us to try something, to learn from it, and it any change, any program that we bring in, especially the timeline. So the Department of Ed put these grants out very, very quickly. So we had to respond quickly. So we were moving quickly, and in an ideal world, we would have had more time to have more meetings and really develop more consensus, if consensus is even the right word. But just develop more of an understanding of what we're going for. And I think, we've tried to work with all of our constituents, and the middle school administrative team have welcomed anyone that has questions, feedback, or if they have a concern, to kind of please be in touch and let us know. We got a question on our Thursday afternoon Zoom call this past week. It actually was after the call. Someone said, hey, didn't we talk about putting a magnet that could open pouches on the exterior of the school in case someone got, inadvertently left school and their pouch was locked? And it's interesting, the principal had let me know that what the team had decided was to move the magnet to the police station, because police station's open 24/7.
Oh, that's a good point.
Which is, I think, a really great idea, or a great middle ground. It also allows the magnet to be in a secure place, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we put a magnet on the exterior of the building and it could come off, or if it could be taken, then that would kind of undermine just what we're trying to do. So, but the solution was to move it to the police station, and it's there. So, but we will report out at school committee in the spring, as in terms of what we're learning, what difference do we believe that this has made. It will include parent perspective, it will include student perspectives, and it will include teacher perspectives.
No, I think that's really the best you can do, right? Because I do think, I openly admit, I would get distracted by a TI-83 calculator. I would get distracted. We had the Verizon, the Nokia phones, and those would distract me. So I cannot imagine being in middle school and having my iPhone with me. And if I don't want to repeat the conversation, but if I remember correctly, again, we're not really talking about class time where kids can put their phones in a bucket or the teacher can hit. We're talking about really that unstructured time where, I don't want to say chaos was happening, but where something would happen on a phone and then it would start leaking into the rest of the day.
Yeah, you know,
I do think the classroom isn't as simple as that, though. Like,
Sure.
I do think that this helps just to give teachers a little bit more to back their request to put phones away in the
Sure.
class, because, you know, I think until it's communicated really well across the school, you might have, you know, some areas where it's a little more flexible, some where it's more strict, and now it's just a consistent expectation across the district. So I think, across the school, I mean. But yeah, I think the hallway transitions are challenging, you know, the less supervised times. But there's also the reality, we were talking earlier today, I don't think we're ever going to be 2 steps ahead of kids in terms of technology. Even like, and I think we'd be naive to sit here and say that there are kids that haven't figured out how to unlock the pouches on their own, or this or that. That's happening, that's real, we're dealing with it. But I think the big piece is that, you know, we're not going to be we're not always going to be ahead of kids in terms of technology and what they know and what they can do and how they can outsmart us, but
we're
we
just
have
trying
to set
to-
the expectations.
right. We're just trying to make a little space where teaching and learning can be prioritized.
Right.
And I have to tell you, if you look at what's happening across the country, there's likely going to be more information that's coming in regard to how phones and social media are impacting students, right? And as we learn more and as we see what's happening across the country, I believe, and I think states are going to be passing kind of guidelines around cell phone use in schools, right? And so, which is going to put the pressure on schools, on us, to implement, you know, what might be state guidance, right?
No, it makes sense. I really do believe if you step back, I think 90% of people, if not higher, would agree with the total thing. I think the big fear is, it's God forbid, it's the literal, if there's an emergency, and I think when we say emergency, everybody is thinking of a school shooting, is if God forbid that happened, being able to connect with your kid. That's the fear. I mean, that is literally, I think, the one thing everybody thought of was, how am I going to be able to get to my kid in the case of an emergency if something happens? And, you know, it's sad that that's the world we live in, but I think that was the biggest concern. And has anything happened to address that, or are you guys working on that, or is it just, it is what it is?
I think the reality is now the students actually have the pouch with their cell phone with them all day long now, whereas there was still that split, because the handbook expectations originally were phone should be shut off and in your backpack, in your locker. So you shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
but
no student ever reads the handbook.
Exactly. So it comes down to what was written in print and what was happening in reality. And I think it was really hard to manage. But I do think there were a lot of kids that did that and, you know, abided by that. So with that case, if there's an emergency, their phone was in their backpack in their locker anyways. And now I think there is a positive that the kids actually have the cell phones on them all day long, but with opportunities throughout the building to unlock them.
I agree with Kara. I think she makes a great point. I also think that we just trying to think about that, Anthony, we've just purchased more magnets, right? So now there are magnets on team. So it's not like there's one magnet in the school for all of the kids. So one of the things that I think, thinking through what challenges we might have, I think we've purchased more magnets and we've distributed them on teams so that kids can get into their pouches if they need to. The other reality is that, you know, if kids needed to get into a pouch and they needed to just cut it, just take a pair of scissors, literally, it's a fabric, right?
Yeah, it's not.
And so, you know, you could just run a pair of scissors across the top and, you know, I'm not suggesting that anyone should do this,
yes.
You know, of course. But in the case of an emergency, there's probably there's more than a few different ways to open that pouch and to kind of get it going. And you know so we too are think a lot about and are working on the safety piece as well. When I say safety, not safety around phones or managing phones, but just trying to do everything we can to make sure that we're doing all of our drills, our lockdown drills, our shelter-in-place drills, all of that, just to make sure that don't do that we're as prepared as we can be.
No, I get it. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But going on to the next topic, or the next, I guess, thing you see mostly on social media. Surprisingly, I mean, I know it's a much smaller reach, but we're not reading a lot about it in the item, but you're definitely seeing it on social media.
Yeah.
Our contract negotiations with our teachers.
Yeah.
I know last time we talked, it was very positive. No contract yet, but is it still going positive? Is it?
I think it is. I think, the Wakefield Administrators Association, the WEA, has a negotiating team, and Kara and I and a few administrators are involved with a small subcommittee represented from the school committee. That's our negotiating team, and they have theirs. And I think the teachers, the union leaders on the teacher side have done a really great job. I think so far we have a number of proposals that we've tentatively agreed to. I think we're getting to the end of the last few proposals that are in any contract negotiations. The last few proposals are always the most difficult. They always take the longest, right? Because the details matter. It usually involves finances, the COLA, and just trying to how do you make that work? Because there's many parts to the contract. And so, but so far, we feel like the tenor in the room has been respectful. We feel like it's been collaborative. It's been good. I think it's been positive. And so, and we're also super optimistic about making progress in the coming weeks, and we hope to be able to respond to the final few proposals that are on the table, and hopefully it will we'll be able to get those tentatively agreed to, and get the teachers a new contract.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we're looking at 2 more meetings in December. We've had a little bit of a gap due to illnesses on both sides. It's just a tough time of year. We've had Thanksgiving break, so we've had a little bit of a lag time since the last time we met, but meeting again on Monday, and then have another one the following week.
And I think that's a positive sign. I always tell people when the negotiating team for the union, and vice versa, but if the union, if somebody gets sick, if everybody's okay rescheduling, that's usually a good. Put it this way: you don't reschedule if you need to get something done right away, and there's a lot of animosity.
Right.
Usually, you try to, even if it's a mediation session, you try to get there right away.
Yeah.
Usually, when you're willing to reschedule, that means it's been a pretty positive relationship, and people are being accommodating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just that it prioritizes keeping everybody in the room hearing the same information, not anybody coming into the next session too far behind or needing to get caught up, or so I think I think the WEA and the school committee and administration have all agreed that works best when everybody is consistently able to be there as much as possible.
Agree.
All right, well then, let's, how long, we have time, but let's talk about what's coming up in the school department.
Excuse me, we are getting ready for our budget. Our budget preparations for the next fiscal year. And so it usually starts, we put together, I think, a pretty aggressive timeline. Christine Mufagna, our school business administrator, usually takes the lead on that for the district. She works collaboratively with us, superintendents, and we work in parallel or in partnership with the Finance and Facilities Subcommittee, which is a different subcommittee than the Labor Subcommittee, which are members of the school committee. And so that's what we're doing now. And so as part of that process, we visit all schools, meet with faculty and staff, and ask them what they feel like they need, what their priorities are. We meet with principals, and principals present. They go over personnel. So they have all of the personnel listed. They have to talk about what their needs are, how it relates to student need, and how it relates to just the operations of their building. And we go over everything soup to nuts. And the same thing happens. So we have principals defend and will kind of advocate for what they feel like they need at the school level, but the same thing happens at the district level. So, for example, Kara is in charge of curriculum and instruction, curriculum instruction and assessment. So not easy. And so, but there are many parts to that, right? And so as we're bringing in new curriculums, and so Kara too has to present her budget, and then we put all the parts of the puzzle together, and we kind of cost out to do what people want to do it in a way they want to do it, and what we start off with, we can't meet everyone's financial expectation. So we have to prioritize and make cuts, and that prioritization and the cutting is really dependent upon the sustainability of the budget, right? And so what can we afford? What can be sustained, right? Because we don't want to get a grant or start something that needs to stop 6 months after we start it because we don't have the ongoing resources to make it work. But it's tricky, it's tricky to do. It's also a tricky time financially because costs are going up in so many other areas of our lives. And that affects schools as well. The purchase of food, the purchase of materials, purchase of, paper, textbooks, digital licenses for books. And so transportation, and the list is quite long. But because we have the largest budget in the municipality, there's a different dynamic and focus on our budget. Yeah.
And I think all of the districts, I think, are talking about just things slowing down in terms of different grants. We've been trying to get in front of every grant opportunity that Department of Ed has put out, particularly related to curriculum resources. We've been really fortunate to cover a lot of curriculum resource costs through grants the last couple of years. So now I think as we're looking into this budget, we're in really good shape because we've done a thorough job of curriculum review across ELA, math. Right now we're in a science, technology, engineering curriculum review. We're also reviewing the new health standards that have just been recommended by Department of Ed. But our team is really solid, so I think that more than ever, we know what are our necessary, what do we absolutely need, like as we're looking at it, what's kind of a nice to have versus 100% we need to have, and then we're really able to break it out at the building level. So we've done a lot of work in terms of that, and so I think we're prepared for this budget season. We're trying to be really cautious and just aware that the grant funding that's happened the last couple of years is likely going to slow down, but we've benefited a ton from it. Just getting, just curriculum builds that might have taken us 2-3 years to be able to do that in 1 year. So we're in really good shape, but now it's just about sustaining that in the years to come.
No, that makes sense, and I always bring this up. I mean, especially I think in our society, our culture, the schools are really the heart of the community. Everything. We were just talking about football games, marching bands, theater, town meetings. Everything happens at the school. Everything surrounds the school. And, people know I do quite a bit of real estate law. You move because of the schools.
Right.
People move from New Hampshire. They move from the mountains. They move from the cities to get to the best school district they can.
Yeah.
It is the number one priority for a vast majority of people. And therefore tends to take up the most money. So what I will say, I do think the town does a nice job of now is, before it used to be if you had to make a cut, it was universal across the board. Now they tend to look at every budget individually and see who needs investments, who can live without, and so on.
Yeah.
So, no. So that's good, guys. Anything else? Anything else coming up?
No, I think just maybe one other comment on the budget is that we've been, the other part, another challenge, both on the town side and the school side, is that our COVID-related grants are sunsetting this year.
Yep.
So all districts, all municipalities throughout the state are kind of negotiating this funding cliff. And so, people are going to need to think about budgeting differently and the use of grants differently. The proposal was made last year, for example, for us to fund benefits through one of our revolving accounts. And so, and I think as a step last year, we said that we will evaluate this, and at the end of the year, we were able to fund a portion of benefits. This year, it looks like we're going to be able to fund all of the benefits through one of our revolving accounts, and so that's food service, right? And so, but we're continuing. That's a tentative kind of commentary right now, but we're looking at, again, that's an example of trying to think differently, do things differently to kind of make the puzzle go together.
That makes sense.
And the reality is that, like I said, we advocate for the school budget, and that's our job to advocate for what students want. And, you know, if we're the very fortunate piece as well is that Steve Mayo's been, I think, a great partner for us. Town council's been very supportive, along with school committee and FinCom for that matter, right? But these are not easy conversations because everyone has a perspective about, you know, how dollars and cents should be managed.
Well, true. And what I bring up too is with your budget, with every budget, right? Especially in a municipality, I tell people it's not, you know, it's very hard, especially when you're cutting. You're raising your hand to lay off your neighbor, and that is a very, very difficult thing to do. So I always, you know, when you see whether it's recommendations from the FinCom or the town council or school committee, you know, that you have to make cuts or you have to, you know, reduce the burden or you have to do something like that. Well, you're basically, what you're asking is for them to fire your neighbor. And if that's, and it's a much, much more difficult conversation than, you know, this much in, this much out. Well, this has been a sad podcast. No,
I was going to say.
Yeah, all right, but on a happier note, then, you guys looking forward to the holidays?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Once we can get there. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just a busy time of year.
It really is.
Yeah.
But anything else before we wrap up? Thank you again to WCAT.
Thank you again to WCAT, of course. And I think we would just say to all of our parents and faculty, staff, parents and families, our students, families in the community, we want to wish everybody a happy holiday, right? And so whether you're celebrating Hanukkah or you're celebrating Christmas, we wish you the absolute best.
No, agreed. So, all said. All right, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.